Hello everyone who has come and listened. I am Jay. Today I would like to tell you a story. Karoline Leavitt versus the media, a showdown that shook the nation. Please listen. The press room. Tension builds. The White House briefing room buzzed with anticipation. Reporters sat poised with their laptops open, cameras rolling, and pens tapping anxiously against notepads. The tension in the air was thicker than usual. This wasn't just another routine briefing. They had come prepared, waiting for a moment to pounce. Then Karoline Leavitt stepped onto the stage, confident, composed, but she felt it immediately. Something was off. The stares weren't just curious or expectant, they were hungry, predatory. She adjusted the microphone, scanning the faces in front of her. Peter from CNN sat in the front row, a smirk barely concealed, while Ethan Caldwell from the Washington Post leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, as if he already knew how this was going to play out. Further back, a young MSNBC reporter whispered something to a colleague, both of them chuckling under their breath. Karoline recognized this setup. This wasn't a press briefing, it was an ambush. Still, she smiled. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice steady. "I know you've all been eager for this briefing, so let's get right to it." A beat of silence. Let them wonder what's coming next. Before she could continue, Peter from CNN shot up his hand. "Karoline," he interrupted, not waiting for acknowledgement. "Before we go any further, can you address the breaking news about the allegations against you?" There it was, the first attack. Karoline's grip on the podium tightened, but her expression didn't falter. She had walked into a battlefield, and the first shots had just been fired. The media ambush begins. The room fell into a tense silence as Peter from CNN's words hung in the air. Karoline Leavitt didn't blink. Allegations? She hadn't even sat down at her desk that morning before the first headlines started flooding social media. She knew the press would latch onto it like vultures. She exhaled slowly, her grip firm on the podium. They wanted her rattled. They wanted her on the defensive. But she wouldn't give them the satisfaction. "Peter," she said, her tone measured, "I assume you're referring to the so-called breaking news that conveniently dropped just minutes before this briefing?" A few murmurs rippled through the press corps. Karoline let the silence stretch, watching as some reporters exchanged glances. They hadn't expected her to go on the offense. Peter leaned forward, smirking. "So, you're denying it?" "I'm addressing it," Karoline corrected, eyes sharp. "Because unlike some people in this room, I don't operate on speculation. Let's be clear, this story is based on anonymous sources, zero verifiable evidence, and a conveniently timed media blitz meant to discredit me before I even step up here." A few more murmurs. Even some of the usual hostile faces hesitated. She wasn't flinching. But then, Ethan Caldwell from the Washington Post spoke up. "Karoline, the DOJ has confirmed they are opening an inquiry into your alleged involvement in suppressing an investigation tied to a Trump donor." His tone was smooth, rehearsed. "Are you saying the Justice Department is also operating on false information?" There it was. The escalation. Karoline's heartbeat quickened, but she forced herself to remain calm. This was more than just a smear. It was a coordinated hit job. "I'm saying this administration has been relentlessly targeted by politically motivated investigations since day one," she fired back. "The media doesn't demand accountability, they demand scalps. If you want to talk about investigations, let's talk about why some of your favorite politicians have evaded scrutiny for years, while conservatives are dragged through the mud based on nothing but rumor." A tense pause. Someone coughed. Karoline scanned the room, taking back control of the moment. "Next question," she said, her voice unwavering. The battle had begun, but she wasn't backing down. The pressure mounts, a battle for survival. The air in the press room felt heavier now, thick with something unspoken, something calculated. Karoline could see it in their eyes. They smelled blood. This wasn't just about scrutiny anymore, it was about destruction. Ethan Caldwell from the Washington Post leaned forward, fingers tapping against his notepad. "So, Karoline," he said, his tone deceptively polite, Are you suggesting that this investigation into you is entirely fabricated? That the Justice Department, an independent institution, is being manipulated? Karoline's pulse quickened. They were setting a trap. If she outright dismissed the inquiry, the media would label her as someone who undermines institutions. The same talking point they had used against Trump for years. But if she entertained the legitimacy of the inquiry, they would spin it as a confession. No way out. She felt the walls closing in. The cameras zoomed in. The room, once a backdrop of murmuring voices and clacking keyboards, now felt suffocatingly still. Karoline took a measured breath. Stay composed. Stay in control. What I'm saying, she said, making sure to hold their gazes, is that the American people have seen this pattern before. The media runs a hit piece, a leak mysteriously surfaces, and suddenly a so-called investigation is launched just in time to dominate the news cycle. The timing isn't just convenient, it's orchestrated. A few reporters stiffened. She had struck a nerve. Peter from CNN pounced. That's a serious accusation, Karoline. Are you implying that the DOJ is working in coordination with the media? She locked eyes with him. He knew what he was doing. If she said yes, the headlines would scream, Karoline Leavitt pushes conspiracy theories, by the time she left this podium. But before she could answer, her phone buzzed inside her blazer pocket. A single vibration. A text. She ignored it. Focus. But then, another vibration. And another. Something was wrong. Karoline didn't make a habit of checking her phone during briefings, but something in her gut twisted. An instinct. A warning. She reached for the device, careful not to let her hand tremble. One unread message. She clicked it open. Don't go back to your office. You're being set up. Her stomach dropped. Her fingers clenched around the phone. The world around her blurred for a split second. The podium, the flashing cameras, the aggressive stares, none of it mattered anymore. A setup? How deep did this go? She swallowed hard, forcing her expression to remain neutral. If they saw fear in her eyes, they would know something was wrong. She took a deep breath, smiled, and looked Peter straight in the eye. I'm implying, she said slowly, that some people in power are very afraid of what happens when the truth comes out. Silence. The next move was theirs. The setup unfolds, a race against time. The press room was dead silent, but inside Karoline's mind, alarms were blaring. Don't go back to your office. You're being set up. Her phone screen had gone dark, but the warning burned in her mind like a flashing siren. Who sent it? Was it real? Or was it a trap within a trap? Peter from CNN shifted in his seat, watching her closely. The media wasn't just here for a press briefing anymore. They were circling like wolves, waiting for her to stumble. Karoline forced her fingers to relax around the podium. She had to move carefully. One wrong step, and this entire moment could collapse on her. Ethan Caldwell from the Washington Post leaned in for the kill. Karoline, he said, his voice slow, deliberate, testing her reaction. If this is just another politically motivated attack, why are there internal White House memos suggesting that senior officials were concerned about your actions? Karoline's breath caught. They had documents? She knew how this worked. Someone had leaked something, real or fabricated, and the media was already treating it as fact. She needed to regain control fast. Concerned about my actions? She repeated, tilting her head slightly. That's interesting, Ethan, because I don't recall any of you showing concern when actual corruption was ignored for years. A few reporters shifted uncomfortably. She was pushing back, hard. But let's talk about those memos, she continued. Since you're all so interested in context, why don't we ask who leaked them? Why don't we ask why they're conveniently timed with this so-called DOJ inquiry? Peter scoffed. So you're suggesting that senior officials in your own administration are part of a conspiracy against you? Karoline didn't blink. They wanted her rattled. They wanted her off balance. But she refused to play their game. She exhaled slowly, choosing her next words carefully. What I'm suggesting, Peter, is that when information is selectively leaked to create a narrative rather than reveal the full truth, someone is playing politics, not justice. The words landed like a hammer. Reporters looked at each other, The room felt charged, dangerous. Then her phone buzzed again, her pulse spiked. She glanced at the screen, trying not to react. "Get out now, they're coming for you." Her heart slammed against her ribs. Who was coming? She inhaled sharply, forcing herself to keep her expression neutral. If she panicked, it was over. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You look tense, Karoline. Something wrong?" She smiled tightly. They were watching her, studying her every move. "No, Ethan," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "I just think it's funny how quickly all of you shift from playing reporters to playing prosecutors." He smirked. "We're just doing our jobs." "Are you?" she shot back. "Or are you following a script that was handed to you before I even walked in here?" Silence. A flicker of doubt crossed a few faces. "Good. Let them question it. Let them wonder." Karoline straightened, keeping her posture firm. She had two choices: stay and fight this war with words, or walk out before whoever was coming for her arrived. But if she left now, would that be seen as running? As guilt? Her phone buzzed one last time. "It's too late. They're already moving." Her blood turned to ice. She had to decide, right now. The trap closes. A desperate escape. The walls were closing in. Karoline could feel it now, more than ever. Every fiber of her being screamed danger. The press, the whispers, the carefully planted questions. It had all been leading up to this moment. Her phone's last message repeated in her mind like a siren. "It's too late. They're already moving." She forced herself to stay composed. One wrong move, one sign of fear, and they'd eat her alive. Peter from CNN leaned forward, a predatory gleam in his eyes. He sensed her hesitation. "Karoline, you haven't denied the allegations. If you have nothing to hide, why not be transparent?" She almost laughed at the irony. They wanted her to fight a battle she couldn't win, because the battlefield had already been rigged against her. Karoline glanced at the door. Her instincts were screaming now. She needed to leave. Immediately. But how? If she suddenly walked out, it would confirm every narrative they were trying to spin. Karoline Leavitt storms out of press briefing amid allegations. She took a slow breath, gripping the podium. Think. Stay ahead. Then, the doors at the back of the room swung open. The press room stirred. A pair of uniformed men, wearing DOJ insignia, stepped inside. Not Secret Service, not White House security. DOJ. Her stomach clenched. This wasn't just an attack on her reputation anymore. This was something bigger. One of the agents approached the podium. "Miss Leavitt," he said, his voice steady but firm, "we need to speak with you. Now." The room exploded. Reporters erupted with questions. The clicking of cameras became a deafening storm. Karoline didn't move. This was it. The final move in their game. She had a split second to react. If she resisted, she would be labeled defensive. If she complied too easily, she would look guilty. Think. Flip the script. Karoline squared her shoulders and smiled. Not fearfully, but with confidence. "Gentlemen, I'm happy to speak with you," she said, her voice smooth. "But I find it curious that you're interrupting a White House press briefing for something so urgent. Shouldn't the American people hear what this is about?" A murmur rippled through the room. She had just forced their hand. Whatever they were planning, they had to say it, on live television. The lead agent hesitated, his jaw tightening. "Miss Leavitt, we need to discuss this privately." Karoline turned to the cameras, her expression unreadable. She was calling their bluff. "Why privately?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "Surely, if there's wrongdoing, the public has a right to know." Silence. The agent shifted uncomfortably. He wasn't expecting this. They wanted her cornered, not in control. Ethan Caldwell from the Washington Post saw an opportunity and pounced. "Karoline, are you refusing to cooperate with federal officials?" The trap. There it was. She couldn't resist outright, but she also couldn't walk blindly into whatever awaited her outside these doors. Then, her phone buzzed again. "Don't go with them. They're not who they say they are." Karoline's blood ran cold. She kept her face calm, but inside, every alarm was blaring. Who the hell was warning her? And more importantly, who were these men really working for? The moment of truth? A dangerous gamble. The press room had turned into a battlefield. Every camera was locked onto her, every microphone waiting to capture her next move. The DOJ agents stood firm, their unreadable expressions only making the situation more ominous. Karoline's heart pounded in her chest, but she didn't let it show. "Don't go with them. They're not who they say they are." The text burned in her mind. Who was warning her? And more importantly, if these men weren't who they claimed to be, who sent them? She glanced at the badge on the lead agent's chest. Everything about him looked official, too official. It was almost too perfect. Peter from CNN jumped in, sensing her hesitation. "Karoline, if you have nothing to hide, why don't you just go with them? Surely transparency is in your best interest?" She clenched her jaw. He was trying to force her hand. If she resisted, they'd paint her as guilty. If she complied, she might be walking straight into a setup. Karoline took a slow, deliberate breath, choosing her next move carefully. "I have no problem cooperating," she said smoothly, turning the situation back on them. "But before I do, I need verification." The reporter stirred. The lead agent blinked. "Excuse me?" Karoline folded her arms, staring him down. "I need verification that you were sent by the Justice Department." A flicker of tension crossed the agent's face. There it was. "If you're official, you won't mind confirming through White House security," she continued. "Standard protocol. I'm sure you understand." The room held its breath. The agent's jaw tightened. "Miss Leavitt, we don't have time for—" Karoline raised a hand, cutting him off. "Then I'll wait for my legal counsel." Boom. The words hit the room like a grenade. She had just shifted the power dynamic. By invoking legal representation, she put them in a corner. Either they prove their legitimacy, or they risk exposing their bluff. The lead agent hesitated just a second too long. That was all she needed. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Miss Leavitt, please hold your position." The reporters whispered frantically. The agent stiffened. The door at the side of the room suddenly burst open. 2 Secret Service agents stormed in, weapons visible. "Step away from her," one of them ordered, his voice sharp, commanding. Karoline's stomach twisted. This was worse than she thought. The fake DOJ agents didn't move. The Secret Service agent at the door locked eyes with Karoline. "Ma'am, come with us. Now." A cold sweat prickled at the back of her neck. Which side was the real threat? She was out of time. She had to make a choice. Nowhere to run, a terrifying standoff. The air in the press room had changed. Tension crackled like static electricity, heavy and suffocating. Everyone felt it. The reporters, once hungry for a scandal, were now silent, watching something unfold that none of them had expected. Karoline's pulse pounded in her ears. 2 Secret Service agents stood at the door. Their presence should have brought relief, but it didn't. The DOJ agents weren't moving. They hadn't reacted in shock. They hadn't turned to confirm their orders. They just stood there. Too calm. Too controlled. Karoline's instincts screamed at her. This wasn't right. A single glance toward the lead DOJ agent told her everything she needed to know. He wasn't here to ask questions. He was here to remove her. But now, with Secret Service present, his plan had been disrupted. She saw it in his eyes, the slightest flicker of calculation. The lead DOJ agent took a slow step forward. His hand rested on the holster at his hip, not in an overtly threatening way, but just enough to send a message. "Miss Leavitt," he said, voice low, controlled. "Let's not make a scene. Come with us now and we'll clear this up privately." A chill ran down her spine. He was still trying to get her alone. Before she could respond, one of the Secret Service agents stepped forward, his voice sharp and commanding. "Back away from her, now." The press corps froze. Some instinctively shrank back in their seats, sensing that something had gone horribly wrong. The DOJ agent didn't back down. His jaw clenched, his posture shifted just slightly. The Secret Service agent's hand went to his own holster. Karoline's breathing shallowed. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was a standoff. The reporters weren't asking questions anymore. Their faces reflected something Karoline herself was starting to feel: fear. Then a movement. A single step from the lead DOJ agent. Too fast, too aggressive. The Secret Service agent reacted instantly. "I said, step back." His weapon was halfway out of his holster. The press room exploded in chaos. Reporters jumped up, chairs scraped against the floor, camera shutters clicked furiously. Karoline had seconds to act. If she stayed still, this could turn into something far worse. She forced herself to breathe, lifted her hands, a subtle sign to de-escalate. Then she made her decision. She turned sharply toward the Secret Service agents. "I'm going with them," she said, her voice clear, loud enough for every camera to catch it. The lead DOJ agent didn't protest. That terrified her more than anything. The second she walked past them, she knew this wasn't over. This was just the beginning. The escape, but at what cost? Karoline walked toward the Secret Service agents, each step deliberate, controlled. She didn't turn back, didn't break her stride, didn't dare show even an ounce of hesitation. But inside, her heart was slamming against her ribs. Something was very wrong. Behind her, she could still feel the unmoving presence of the so-called DOJ agents. They hadn't fought her decision, hadn't protested her leaving with Secret Service, because they didn't need to. She could feel it. This wasn't over. The moment she reached the door, the lead Secret Service agent, the one who had ordered the DOJ men to stand down, lowered his voice. "Keep walking. Don't stop." A fresh wave of adrenaline hit her veins. She didn't ask questions. She obeyed. The door shut behind them, cutting off the press room's chaos. But the momentary silence felt even worse. The agents on either side of her moved quickly, guiding her down a private corridor. "This way," one said, urgency laced in his voice. Karoline swallowed hard. "Where are we going?" No answer. They rounded a corner, past a security checkpoint, and caught sight of two more agents standing post, their faces unreadable, eyes sharp. This wasn't just an escort. This was an extraction. She stopped walking. The lead agent turned sharply. "Keep moving, ma'am." Her instincts screamed at her. Something wasn't right. She shook her head, standing her ground. "Not until you tell me what's happening." The agent hesitated, just for a second. Then his expression hardened. "Miss Leavitt," he said carefully, his tone a warning. "There are multiple security threats targeting you right now. We are under direct orders to remove you from this facility and take you to a secure location." Her blood ran cold. "Security threats?" she repeated. "From who?" His jaw tightened. "We don't know yet." Lies. He knew. Karoline's mind raced. She had been a target politically, but this was different. A phone buzzed in one of the agent's earpieces. He pressed his hand to it, listening, his body visibly tensing. Then his eyes snapped to her. "We have to move. Now." A chill shot down her spine. They practically pushed her forward, leading her toward an exit where a black SUV idled, engine running. The rear door swung open. Another agent was already inside, waiting. Karoline hesitated. The lead agent stepped closer, his voice lower now, urgent. "Ma'am, if you don't get in that car right now, I can't guarantee your safety." Karoline's breath hitched. She looked back just once, toward the hallway they had come from. Something told her that if she got in that car, there was no turning back. And yet, what choice did she have? Slowly, she climbed inside. The door slammed shut behind her. The SUV sped off into the unknown. And Karoline, she knew this was far from over. This wasn't an escape. This was just the beginning. Into the unknown, the road to truth. The SUV tore down the dimly lit streets of Washington, D.C., its tires humming against the pavement. Karoline sat rigid in the back seat, hands gripping her lap, heart hammering against her ribs. The tinted windows concealed her from the outside world, but she could still feel it, the weight of everything closing in around her. The Secret Service agents flanking her remained stone-faced, their eyes scanning the streets with quiet precision. No one spoke. Finally, Karoline broke the silence. "Where are we going?" The lead agent, sitting across from her, didn't look up from his earpiece. "A secure location." She narrowed her eyes. That wasn't an answer. She leaned forward slightly. "Why am I a security threat all of a sudden? Who ordered this?" The agent glanced at her, and for the first time, she saw something flicker in his expression. Hesitation. That scared her more than anything. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady but laced with something unspoken, "things are moving faster than expected." There are people who don't want you speaking publicly right now. Her stomach twisted. People? Or government agencies? Silence. That was her answer. Her breath shallowed. This wasn't just about politics anymore. This was bigger. She reached for her phone. The agent's eyes flicked to it immediately. "We can't allow that," he said flatly. Karoline clenched her jaw. "Can't allow what? Making a call?" The agent didn't blink. "It's for your safety." Her grip tightened around the device. That was the problem. No one had even confirmed whether she was actually in danger, or if the danger was simply her presence. The car took a hard right, speeding toward the outskirts of the city. "Pull over," she ordered, forcing authority into her voice. No response. "Pull over." Still, nothing. She swallowed the lump forming in her throat. She wasn't in control here. The SUV slowed slightly as they reached a checkpoint. 2 more black vehicles were already waiting. Reinforcements. The lead agent spoke into his earpiece. "She's secure. Moving to the next stage." Karoline's breath hitched. Next stage? The checkpoint gate lifted. The SUVs moved in formation, disappearing into the night. Karoline stared out the window. She had spent years controlling the narrative. But now, for the first time, she was the story, and she had no idea how it would end. The convoy sped through the darkness, the city lights fading behind them. Karoline sat in silence, her mind racing. For the first time in her career, she wasn't the one shaping the narrative. She was trapped inside it. Who had ordered this? Who had tried to remove her from the press room? Was this a cover-up? A warning? Or something even worse? The SUV pulled onto a secluded road, the destination still unknown. Her pulse pounded. This wasn't just about politics anymore. This was about survival. She glanced at the agents around her. Their expressions remained unreadable, but she could feel the shift. They weren't just protecting her. They were controlling her. Karoline had built her career exposing hypocrisy, tearing down false narratives, and demanding the truth. Now she had to fight for her own. She straightened her shoulders, exhaling slowly. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. And now the question is, what happens next? What do you think Karoline should do? Who is really behind this? Was this a setup, or something far bigger than politics? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's break this story down together. And if you want more gripping stories like this, hit the like button and subscribe. The truth is out there. Let's uncover it together. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and leave comments for the story.